You ready, Jim? Here we go. Welcome to ReneMarie Stroke of Love once again. This is an incredible show as well as the first one. And we want to once again thank Dr. April and John for the last show. It was really a Sunday morning blessing to have them a part of the show. And this show is going to be just as incredible. This is a continuation of the Say Yes to Life. Is that what it's called, Judy? Say Yes to Life.
Yes, it is.
Judy has
just say yes to life.
Just say yes to life. That Keith Taylor had introduced us to. And waiting to hear the stories in it. It's just incredible. And we're so honored to have Pastor Beverly, Steve, and Kim as a part of the show. Judy's going to read the title. We're waiting for another guest from Ashley. Is that her name? We're waiting for Ashley from Oregon as well. I don't know. We were having some technical difficulties.
Alicia.
Alicia, sorry.
And
Alicia.
I will read Alicia's story as well. And if she comes on a little later, her story will have been mentioned.
Okay, excellent. Just a reminder, Kim, I had to mute you because we could hear you talking through the intro. If you want to, yeah. That's no. That's why I muted you. So just know you have to unmute yourself before we'll be able to listen to you. Jim, you could put the screen on everybody. I always want to do my technical stuff on the show. We're live, we just have to roll with the punches as we always do. Life is about rolling with the punches, right? Don't you think that you have to just go with the flow, take it each moment? That's why we wing it on this show. Winging it in our world is recommended and approved because that's how we do it. So I'm going to let Judy read her press, which is long, but it really gives you a lot of intricate details into how important this show is. And we want to thank Keith for introducing us to this book. It's wonderful. And Judy for always doing her work on bringing a lot of people into the mix and conversations. It's not about my story. It's about us as a group sharing our experiences and our stories that really brings power to it. So we're gonna dedicate this show to a prayer that I have for someone. Pastor Beverly knows who I'm talking about. We're gonna keep her intentions in our prayer throughout this show. We just think it's really important. So without letting you know exactly what we're talking about, please keep an intention in your prayers throughout the show. That's really important. So Judy, go ahead.
I'd like first to introduce to you Steve Boatwright, Reverend Beverly Hill, Kim O'Kelly Lee, and Alicia Goodman hopefully will be joining us as well. And they're all from Stroke Awareness, Oregon. Steve Boatwright had worked in careers ranging from the electronics and radio industries to music and even gymnastics. And in 2008, he took an early retirement to open with his wife, Pam, Elite Repeat, a high-end clothing consignment shop where they work alongside dedicated volunteers daily. Prior to his work in electronics, Steve toured professionally as a singer-drummer for over 2 decades. He signed with Columbia Records at the age of 15 and went on to play with Santana, Buffalo, Springfield, Janis Joplin, and Chuck Berry. After moving to Bend, Oregon, he and a few other musicians formed Soul Benders, and he became its lead singer. They'd played classic rock and soul at festivals and concerts and quickly became one of the area's most popular bands. Steve always sang in a band, and he knew he would never give it up after his retirement. On the evening of June 2013, Steve suffered a cerebral stroke and spent a month in the hospital, and then he began rehab. He had right-sided paralysis and balance issues and worked with occupational therapists. After acute care, he relearned independent living skills with the help of his wife. Steve describes himself as a man of faith and never a quitter. He sees every day as a gift, a new opportunity to get better and improve, and now performs his talented singing in concert in front of thousands of fans in his audience. Reverend Beverly Hill has 2 master's degrees, one in Christian education and one in divinity from the Methodist Theological School in Delaware. Her doctorate ministry is from St. Paul's School of Theology in Kansas City. Beverly has written several academic papers throughout the years and delivered papers at Oxford Institute from 2002 through 2007. Reverend Beverly had the first massive hemorrhagic stroke in 1999 as she was heading to Oxford in the United Kingdom to do independent doctoral research at Oxford Brookes University for 2 years. She arrived in the UK in a wheelchair, left 2 years later carrying her own luggage. Now Beverly is a retired pastor living in North Carolina. Beverly's second stroke occurred while in the United Kingdom in 2000. When she got back to the USA, she had suffered 28 TIAs in a matter of 4 years. Finally, Beverly was diagnosed with moyamoya, a rare artery of the brain disease. Moyamoya awareness is celebrated every year in Oregon on May 6th. Beverly had 2 brain surgeries in 2007 and was able to complete her career of 31 years and retire in 2020. Married to her husband Gerald Hall of 27 years, who is retired from the military, 30 years in the Army, National Guard, Air Force Reserves, and served in Desert Storm in Iraq, Freedom and Afghanistan. And we'd like to take this opportunity to thank him for his service for our country. Beverly continues to serve at a local church and preach the children's message every Sunday. She also serves as an outreach coordinator and does many volunteer activities as needed. Kim O'Kelly Lee's career began at the age of 19 as a backup singer for Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, performing on tour all over the Eastern Seaboard and England in over 75 venues, including Madison Square Garden in New York City, Garden State Arts Center in New Jersey, and the London Palladium, to name just a few. Her next job was on tour with Perry Como, opening his show and backing him up in a 4-person singing and dancing group called Good Stuff. In her 20s and 30s, Kim flourished as a professional actress, dancer, as well as a singer. And those are just a few of her amazing credits. Kim suffered a massive hemorrhagic stroke 3 days after Christmas in 2014. After a week at Providence St. Joseph Medical Center in Burbank, California, Kim was transferred to the Burbank Healthcare Rehab Center, working with a physical therapist. Kim was informed that the stroke had caused her to be paralyzed on her left side. She immediately responded, "Paralyzed? I'm not going to affirm that." Returning home and being involved with intensive therapies and now still wearing a brace when needed, she's stronger, faster, and more coordinated and confident than ever. She can turn around easily, climb stairs in her house, extend her arms and raise it, lift weights, wash and braid her hair, and drive again. In her 3rd year of recovery, both Kim and her neighbor began writing a 2-woman play based on their lives separately and together. In 2016, Kim was another stroke survivor. 2016, Kim with another stroke survivor started a stroke survivors group that continues to thrive. Recently, Kim finished compiling A Story of Hope, a 12-minute video that chronologizes 5 years of her recovery in 2020, just before COVID hit. Production began on her play, Freedom Off the Page. Alicia Goodman, an active 34-year-old that frequented local gyms, enjoyed hiking and other sports, started experiencing heavy breathing, searing pain radiating from the base of her skull, nausea, dizziness, feeling faint, and thought it was a monthly headache that from previous years. Her chiropractor attributed the soreness in her neck to being out of place, and with the assumption that she had her head, neck, and spine worked on. Still in pain, and after having a CTA, she was advised her muscles needed a rest. Next, Alicia experienced strong tingling sensations down the right side of her body, from her head to her toe. The interior of Alicia's vertical arteries in the back of her neck, similar to the carotid arteries in front of her neck, had torn apart internally, and the first 2 strokes immobilized her entire right side. She knew she was having a stroke. With her husband Drew's help, she was driven to the hospital emergency room, and a CAT scan revealed vertebral artery dissected, causing bilateral vertebral artery dissection. During ensuing years and today, Alicia has reflected on the attitudes of doctors and paramedics that overlooked things in evaluating her and realized she could have had dire consequences to her health. As far as the delays in care she experienced from various medical professionals, Alicia doesn't hold anger in her heart for them. She recognizes that everyone is fallible, even the professionals. That doesn't mean that they or the public can't become more educated on the long-term or sudden signs of a stroke. What Alicia wants people to understand is that when someone is in pain, don't just ignore them. Believe them and work with them to identify where the pain is coming from. Again, I'd like to welcome our guests, Steve, Beverly, Kim, and Alicia, if she gets to come on with us. And they all have an important message of awareness to bring to our audience, and for this message to be shared with family and friends alike. Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you so much for reading all those details. It does encapsulate the stories that you all have. They're all different, with strokes. Each story is so different. That's why it's important for us to do this and to bring awareness to strokes, because each story will bring a different message to somebody, and they could be aware of the signs because they're so different in each person. Let's start with, first of all, I want to say that Alicia, is that her name? Alicia.
Yes, Alicia.
Her story, while it's fresh in my brain, that, maybe from Alicia's story, we should realize that when you have something going on and there's no conclusion or no progress in getting better, you really should go have second and third opinions, because chiropractors are only chiropractors. Neurologists are only neurologists. You really need to look at the whole picture to find out what's going on. So maybe that's something that from Alicia's story we could just recommend to people to bring into their attention. But Reverend Beverly, let's start with you. Tell us your story and how it changed your life. Oh my God, 27 TIAs you had?
28
TIAs.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Well, in 1999, I was an active pastor. I was moving from being an active pastor to going to school in Oxford, England. So we were packing up our house and um, trying to say goodbye to the church that I had served for 6 years. And it was very difficult, very stressful. My youngest daughter experienced seizure disorder, and so she ended up in the hospital. And then shortly thereafter, she was going to be graduating and going to college. And so my life was very much in the air, up in the air. And so it ended up that I had this stroke, and everybody said, well, it's stress. You know, I would have had a stroke a lot sooner than you had because you had so much stress in your life. My mother had passed away. I mean, lots of things had happened that really made it obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me. I went to my daughter's graduation service in a wheelchair. I was totally paralyzed on my right side, and knew that if I gave up going to Oxford, I wouldn't get there, period. So I went ahead and after a while, I did go to Oxford. I left in September and went to Oxford and did my PhD research. And I ended up doing a lot more than just the PhD research. I ended up being a part of a community in a little village called Horton-cum-Studley. And in that village that I lived in, I was the cleaner. I cleaned for a living. I started out in a wheelchair, but then after that, I was using that as my rehab. So when you dust, you have to use your arm and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So
that's so smart that you're using it like, you know.
Yeah. And so that's what I did. And I got stronger and everything. But the second stroke came when I was in Oxford. I was on a step ladder, dusting a big chandelier in a hallway. And I ended up falling off the ladder and having my second stroke. I was on the National Health Service at that time, and they didn't do really anything. They said, you had a history of strokes, you probably had another stroke, so, you know, just don't lift anything. And they did no CT, no MRI, nothing. They said, you're on the National Health history. You know,
didn't you insist that they do the MRI? I would have insisted that they do it.
You can't insist in England. It's their call. So they sent me back to one of my clients, and I stayed with them in kind of a bed and breakfast kind of situation for 6 weeks. And then I went back to cleaning, and the folks that had me clean for them, they either gave me new jobs to do. For instance, I polished silver for a while. I ironed clothes for a while. And then later on, they bought extra vacuum cleaners so that I wouldn't have to lift the vacuum cleaners up and down the steps, that kind of stuff. And I did my thing. Then I was back to America. I was appointed as a full-time pastor at the Marengo United Methodist Church in Marengo, Ohio, near Columbus. And anyway, there's where I had 28 TIAs. And I was not diagnosed with moya moya until 2004. And when I was diagnosed with moya moya, it was very clear why I had my strokes. And so anybody that's under 50 that has a stroke that says they don't know why they had a stroke, I ask them to find out. If you have an angiogram, you can find out if you've had moya moya, if you have moya moya, and to get the life-saving operations that I had. So that's important.
We're gonna ask Kim and Steve to tell their story, but before we forget, what is moya moya? What is that?
Moya moya is a rare artery of the brain disease. It narrows the arteries, the internal carotids. And so the moya moya vessels are just little vessels that come around the ganglia of your brain, and they're very fragile. So on an angiogram, my brain on my left side, because I had the affected right side area, my left side was totally gray, no white blood vessels. There should be white blood vessels.
Right.
And so on the other side, there was just a little gray, but they said, had it gone down any farther, I would have died. I did have a third very mild stroke after I had my surgeries, but those surgeries were life-saving.
Wow.
That was done by Dr. Gary Steinberg in Palo Alto at Stanford.
Wow.
And he's the expert on moya moya disease.
Wow.
So
And Judy and I have been doing these shows for how long, Judy? 8 years?
8 years.
And that's the first time I ever heard of that terminology. Like I've heard of the arteries and the blood vessels, and we've had tons of doctors on, but it's almost like aphasia. Aphasia wasn't a name wasn't put to the results.
Moya moya wasn't discovered until 1979.
Right.
And it was named because it's Japanese. It means puff of smoke, and that's what your brain looks like on an angiogram. And so they thought it was just an Asian disease. So they weren't looking. And so when I was diagnosed, it was 1 in a million. It's now 1 in 250,000.
Wow.
Oh.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. Judy, we should do a whole show on that to delve deeper into what that is. Like, is it something that you can prevent, like and to find out prior to, the third and 28 stroke, TIAs. So it's incredible. We'll come back to you, Reverend. But Kim, tell us a little bit about your story.
So December 28th, 2014, as I look back, I had a couple of signs, but I didn't know they were signs. So I want to share those.
Okay.
I had weakness that was happening in my left arm. And I had gone to the doctor prior to feeling that weakness. This was a couple of months before the stroke. And my blood pressure, I'd always had low blood pressure. My blood pressure was 146/96. They said, oh, that's fine. They didn't say anything. Now, my mother had high blood pressure. My father had high blood pressure. My sisters, they all were on high blood pressure medicine. But she didn't say, go home, just keep an eye on your blood pressure. So anybody out there, I want to say that if your blood pressure is, over 120/70, and you've always had low blood pressure, you check it yourself, okay? And I went back the next month. My blood pressure was still that. She said nothing. And then this weakness, and I thought to myself, what is this? It's strange. And I thought, well, maybe I should go to urgent care because I'm not going to go to my doctor. They're not saying anything, but I didn't go. I was at a LA family gathering, and I had the stroke right in front of my husband, my daughter, my cousins. And the crazy thing about my stroke was, and I lost the entire left side, couldn't move it. I was taken by ambulance, but my cousin had just found out that her 21-year-old son had committed suicide. Oh. And I was there. I know it's horrible. And I was there because I had I'm a meditator over 30 years, morning and night. Prayer and meditation changed my life. And when she told me that, I went into meditation, and I got back I heard 4 things. 1, he didn't commit suicide. Well, it wasn't his intention. He wasn't jumping to kill his life. He was afraid. I also saw him surrounded in light. And then I heard a question, which was crazy. If God had whispered into her ear when he was conceived that she would only have him 21 years, would she say she didn't want him? I was saying these things. I told her this. She reached out to me. And as I touched her hand, all of a sudden, the pain in my head, I've never felt like this so badly. My first thought was, am I having a psychic transference of pain? My desire was to help her and to ease her pain. And that's what it felt like. I went outside, I cried for 15 minutes. I couldn't stop crying, and then it went away. And my husband and I were like, well, he watched and saw. He said that he saw that transference. And we said, should we go to the hospital? What's going on? We went upstairs, meditated for 30 minutes, talked for 10, ate pizza. And as soon as I got back around my cousin, the energy began to drain out of my left arm, then my left leg. Then I slumped over, threw up, and then my face drooped. And they said, call 911. Anyway, so fast forward, they told me I was, paralyzed. I said, as Judy said, do not say that. I will not affirm that. And I was determined to have a full recovery. And another meditation, I was told, just act like in hindsight, you're going to gain so much more than what you'd lost. And I heard, take the journey with joy. And my husband came in the next morning and said, let's take this journey with joy. We were very in tune. We're both meditators, very, very strong faith. And so, you know what? That's what we've been doing. Every morning I'm faced, if I can give anything to anyone, every morning I'm faced when I wake up with the left side. I get up and my foot is like this, that's why I wear a brace, but I walk and I can either place my consciousness on what I don't have and what doesn't work, or I can place it on what I do have.
Right.
And so that gives me energy, and I'm grateful, thankful that 20% of people live after having a hemorrhagic stroke. We are, we are miracles.
Yeah, we're the gift. And if we don't use the gift to help others and do what we're doing, then we're wasting our gift.
What was the purpose of having?
Yes.
So in the other thing, I wrote a play, as she said, but it was canceled because of COVID. And now we are doing that play. I haven't been on stage for 20 years. Wow. I've never been in a stroke body.
Yeah.
And I don't my cane the entire play. It is about my life and my partner's life. And the through line is a piano lesson, because I teach piano singing and songwriting.
Right.
I thought when I left Los Angeles, that's it. So why do I need to stay? My daughter had just turned 18. All the things that the thoughts that you have of what you've lost can bring you down. And so many people get just pressed behind stroke. And I'm here to say, you don't have to go that route. Sorry.
Kim, what I was going to say was, this is one of the things, and then we'll have you share your story, Steve, is, some of us, like all of us here, can comprehend what needs to be done, right? We know, like we were on the show before with Dr. April, and she was saying you have to stay calm, through it, because it's a brain trauma. But there's those of our stroke family members that don't understand that. Their brain is so traumatized and not defragmented that they don't understand that meditation and prayer, and they're frightened. They're frightened. And I understand that, because I'm as spiritual as you, and I had an out of body experience where God spoke to me when I had my stroke. He took me out of my body. But even though I had that experience where I was taken out of my body and spoke to God, and God spoke to me, I should say, when he put me back down in my body, I still had to go through the process to get to the point where I am today.
Yeah, and we're human.
Yeah, we're actually supposed to be spiritual beings living in a human body, but when you have a stroke, right? When you have a stroke, that's all out of whack. Everything is all over the place. So, you know, I would love to do a whole side show with you about positivity and about helping people. And what I always refer to it is, it's like an onion, right? Now you're that compressed onion, and you have to very slowly start to peel away the onions. And when the gift that there's a person, Dominic Cortellessa, who I keep talking about all my life, but he is the one that he spoke to me in a manner that I could understand. And he took his time, and he didn't know he was doing this initially, but I started to trust him. So then the layers started to peel back, where I didn't feel bad about, I didn't feel fearful to talk to him, you know? And he would, and there's something that always stuck in my brain about what he said was, he would come and ask me a question and then say, you don't have to answer right now. I'll come back tomorrow. So he gave me the time, and he made me do the work. He didn't do it for me. He made me do the work. And he gave me, I worked for that place for 12 years. So he was teaching me how to do it. So I would love to try to teach people that.
Yes. I got that from my husband and daughter. They allowed me to do the work.
Yes.
They said, "You got this, Mom. You've got it." Yeah. And all I want to say before Steve starts is, you know, fear, we can't be upset with when we get regret, fear, we have body shame, you know, all the human emotions. But there is, in that same moment, an opposite emotion. And I ask you, all of you, that when you have that fear, there's something that you can have courage or faith. When you have doubt, you can have trust. Look into the opposite emotions, right? Because those are that is your saving grace. Yeah. And we all have that ability as human beings. Yeah. So don't make yourself wrong that you're afraid. Dang right, we get afraid.
Yeah. And what I've learned is, you know, when somebody would say, when I be talking to somebody and I wasn't making sense, because sometimes I'd ramble and not be clear in what I'm saying and talk too quickly, they would look at me like, what's wrong with that person? So that would start to make me a little crazed inside. Yeah. And then, so now what I do is, you know, I use those tools that Dominic helped me put in my belt. And I'm like, and he said, then don't answer them right now. Say, you know what, I'll be right back. Like, go to the bathroom, go where you gotta go, get out of that moment, gather yourself, because we have the right to do that. We have the right to do
beautiful. That. Yeah. For aphasia people.
Yeah. So Alicia, you want to open? Alicia's here. You want to open up your window, and then we'll have Steve, and then you'll be able to talk a little bit. Steve, while Alicia's coming on, tell us a little bit about your story.
First, before I forget about it, fear is a liar.
Yes, it is, sir.
And fear is the favorite weapon of the enemy. So we have to remind ourselves of that.
Yeah. There's no truth in it.
I guess I just began when I had my stroke, huh?
Yeah.
My wife and I were at our store, and at the end of the day, I just felt I felt fine, but I just felt like I had a little pinched nerve. That's it. And I thought I'll be okay. Came home, went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, and this arm, my right arm over here, just went plop when I got out of bed. And I felt this heaviness in my leg. And immediately I asked my wife to take me to the hospital. I said, "This is serious. Something's going on."
How did you know it was like it was internal that you knew it was serious, or it was just how you felt?
No, God told me it was serious. I felt it right in my soul. I mean, I didn't. It wasn't in my brain or anything. My soul said, "Get to the hospital."
No, that's the internal compass that
Exactly.
we need to live by, that we listen to.
Yeah. So we went to the hospital, and I'm kind of a big guy, and my wife helped to wheel me in, and then my bandmates showed up immediately, and they all helped a lot. I love these guys, and so as we were going to check into the room, they told me after, they said, "Well, you had a stroke. We're keeping you in the hospital."
Wow.
So as we were checking into the room, and this kind of, I find humor in a lot of stuff, even during that time. So I'm in the wheelchair. I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, I've had a stroke. What's going to happen here?" And my wife, it was time to go up to the room. And this sweet little old man, about 90 pounds, was the volunteer to take me up to the room in the wheelchair. And he is just pushing, and I'm thinking, "Oh boy," and my wife's helping. Well, in the elevator up there, I had my full stroke. So I remember it. Yeah.
In the elevator while you were going up to your room.
Yeah.
That's when you had another stroke. Wow.
Yeah. And I just remember seeing the light just dwindle, and that was it. And then I don't remember anything except that I woke up hours later, and I had tubes all in me. The whole, everybody went through this, and so that was that's what happened to me. And then I have paralysis on my right side, which I thought, "Oh, it'll go away. I'll work hard at it." It's been going on 9 years. It's a little better, but I do walk with a brace also, Kim. So. But I've always had a pretty healthy thinking. I call it. I'm a positive guy, but what you think and what you say to yourself has a lot to do with your attitude and the way you feel.
Yeah, you need to visualize yourself.
Exactly.
You got it. Visualizing in meditation, whatever way you do it. You could go for a walk while you're walking. You could see yourself walking better.
Yeah.
See yourself how you want to walk. It's so important to focus on what you want the intention to be.
Exactly.
So that's incredible.
And so but music has saved me. Music has really been my therapy. Yeah. And it took me a year, but a year later, I hobbled up on stage with my cane. I'm the lead singer. My bandmates made sure I had a nice stool for me.
Yes.
I sat down, and I was scared to death for the first time in over 50 years. I was scared to death. I'm thinking, there's a few thousand people out there, and I'm thinking, what are they thinking of me here? I'm hobbling on stage, but as soon as I started singing, and I saw the crowd smiling, laughing, singing along, dancing, everything went away, and I was fine.
Yeah, you were the example. You're the example of what the positivity of what it takes, the courage, that's the word I'm looking for, the courage to get out there and to get back in front of those people. It's like with me playing softball, you know, and then my stroke didn't stop me from playing softball.
Yeah.
I went right back on the field. Yes, 80% of the time I played third base, I threw it to first, my reactions were the same. The other 20, the ball went this way, that way. I couldn't bat the way I did. And another friend of ours, Mark McEwen, I don't know if everybody remembers Mark McEwen. He was a CBS broadcaster and sportscaster and entertainment caster. And, you know, with presidents, entertainers, he hung around with everybody. He suffered a major stroke. And I always say, I promote this till this day. They should allow him to go back to be on those shows, not to be cut out, because that would be the prime example of people that, you know, bring light to strokes, bring light to aphasia, bring light to the fact. You know, Bruce Willis suffered from aphasia. Luke Perry died at age 50 with a stroke. So there's a lot of more light shining on us. But could you imagine that somebody like Mark McEwen gets back in the stream of things? They allow him to get back in the stream of things, and people that suffer strokes can go, that's going to be me.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it again. I'm going to go back in, and they're going to welcome me.
Yeah.
They're going to welcome me back in there. So it's pretty incredible.
And Kim, you know how exciting it's going to be when you step back on stage?
Yes.
I know.
Yeah.
It's May 27th.
Woo!
Yeah, it's Tower Theater, 400 people. Yeah, and then I'm very excited. If I can just move, if I can just move one person, you know, and they say, wow, I can do that too. Yeah,
Now you're gonna stream it, right? You said you're
I
gonna.
believe it's going to be streamed, so everybody, Tower Theater, towertheater.org. Go look for Freedom off the page, and it's going to be $20 to stream it. So, I mean, all my peeps in LA and peeps in Chicago, we're really excited.
Oh, that's so good.
I
That's
hope
so
you
good.
guys, I hope you're there, Steve.
I hope so. Yeah, we probably will be. And I'll spread the word too with my band here, and because we're doing the stroke awareness organ fundraiser, and
We're doing it. Yep. So we're doing one.
May 17th at Silver Moon. Yeah,
Ashley has it.
yeah, it'll be fun. Anyway,
Great. Look, Alicia's
Thank
got.
you. Alicia.
hi,
Tell us,
Lisa.
yeah, she's got it there. Tell us your story, Alicia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Alicia, I just want you to know that I did the promo, which was your press. I read it in the beginning of the show.
Awesome.
You didn't miss out on that.
Well, something that I was talking about, you weren't on, when Judy read it. What I think one of the lessons that we can all gravitate towards, not us, but those that are, in the mainstream, if something happens or you're not getting any resolution or recovery from a specific injury, or no matter what it is, then maybe you should go get second and third opinions so that the bigger picture can be looked at. Because maybe it wasn't your chiropractor, she's not a neurologist. She doesn't know you're having a stroke, that's not her world. So maybe we should go to other doctors, to have that. So I thought I'd share that with you. So tell us a little bit about your story.
So when I was 34, I used to, so I had a car accident in 2015 that caused my neck to go out on a regular basis. And it would just kind of, it was really painful. It was upper spine, like up at the base of my skull. And so in 2019, when I started to feel pain in that same area, I thought that that's what was happening, except for 4 years, I had been getting something called a cervicogenic headache with the pain at the base of my skull. So it would start in the neck and then kind of wrap around, and it was extremely painful, similar to a migraine, but different. And this time I didn't have the headache. So I was concerned, but I thought my neck was just going out because I felt it early. So I went and saw my chiropractor, had an adjustment, and then over the course of the next couple days, the pain just got considerably worse. So I went to urgent care, and they told me I must have pulled a muscle, and then they gave me muscle relaxers and pain pills. That didn't help at all. So later that day, I went to the ER.
Wait 1 second. One time I went on muscle relaxers, and I was flying. I didn't know where I was, and it wasn't until I went back to the doctors and told them, the nurse says, "Oh, you were high." Not that I was high on drugs, but I was high on the muscle relaxers. They're potent stuff. So go ahead.
Yeah. So they didn't even, nothing touched the pain. It didn't help at all. So I ended up going to the emergency room, and they did a CT scan and basically just said that I must have hurt myself doing something, because they couldn't see anything, no bony structures, whatever. They said they couldn't see anything on the CT scan. So they referred me to sports medicine and sent me home. Over the course of the next week, I had a couple deep tissue massages. The pain just stayed. I was taking a leave every day to try to keep it at bay and just survive, live through my day-to-day life. I missed a couple days of work because I was just in so much pain. And then we had a hunting trip planned for a while. So, I had already been to the ER. I had already been to urgent care. I'd already seen a chiropractor and a massage therapist. So I was like, I'm not going to miss the trip. I'm just going to take my airplane pillow,
Yep.
a cervical collar, and my Aleve and an ice pack, and I'm just going to go. So I babied myself the whole entire time we were out there. I mean, we hiked like over 50 miles in those 9 days, the times that I went out on the morning hunts and the evening hunts. Sometimes I didn't go out because I was just exhausted from the pain. But I'd always come back and, get my neck pillow and lay down with ice underneath the back of my neck. It was, the base of my skull was just on fire, and it had been a couple weeks. So by the time we get back, that's October 7th or October 6th. And I'm just exhausted. So I get my first good night's sleep in a normal bed again. The next day I go to work, and long story short, lose my job. And after I get done saying goodbye to everyone.
Why did you lose your job?
Some stuff happened while I was gone that I had no control over because I wasn't even in cell service. They thought I had changed the password to my email, which I didn't. I think someone tried to get into it and got locked out.
They don't even have a conversation with you about it,
No. It was, but I mean, yeah, it was a stressful moment. I mean, that's what started it. And then they found something in my desk that I had already taken care of, but they thought that it was, necessary that they knew about. And I was like, well, it's already been taken care of. It's not really a big deal. Everything's already been handled. And they're like, well, they had an HR person there that we kind of had an HR consultant, and she was really concerned about it. I didn't even know her. So I was like, whatever, it's not a big deal. And then everybody, after I lost my job, I was like, okay. And I wasn't really that upset. I was just like, this is just a stepping stone. Apparently this was meant to happen. And everybody told me that too. Everyone at work was like, there's better things for you.
Yes.
So I was okay. And I hugged everybody, and I went out to my car, and then I started pulling forward to the stop sign, which was about a half a block away. And I felt a head rush. And then my boyfriend was like, he sent me a text message and said, hey, do you still have a job? I said, no, because I felt weird about it, the whole weekend right before. And I said, I'll talk to you about it later. I'm going home. My neck's killing me. So I went home, or I was planning on going home, and I got to that stop sign in my car and felt a head rush. I drank some water, and then I heard my dad tell me to back up now. And he had passed away in 2012, a block away from where I was sitting.
Wow.
And I was just like, okay. So I backed up and immediately started having a stroke.
Wow.
And that's when I felt.
Was your car in park?
Yeah, it was about this far from the curb.
That's okay, as long as it was in park and you
Right.
had control over it.
He said back up now, and I did, and I just put it in park. And that's literally as soon as I put it in park was when my I started feeling tingling right here all the way down to my toes, and my entire right side went numb. And I had just gotten the phone number of a coworker. So I asked Siri, through slurred speech to call my boss, and she didn't answer. So I kind of like grabbed my phone with my left hand because it was on my lap. And I called my coworker whose phone number I had just gotten. And I said, I need help. And she was like, what's wrong, sweetie? And she came running out and she called 911, and she didn't know what was going on. And I was kind of not sure yet. But I told her, I said, I think I'm having a stroke. And she told them that on the phone. But then, my eyes were closed because my right eye was fixed to the left. And my mouth, I could feel my mouth drooping. Like as soon as I went numb, I could feel everything pulling.
Wow.
And she was trying to relate to them, she's 34, she's healthy, she works out all the time. She doesn't have any health issues. And they're like, oh, tell her to keep her eyes closed. Is she having a seizure? And she's like, no, she's not having a seizure. I was getting kind of frustrated then because it seemed like the phone call was a really long phone call just to get across the idea that they needed to get there.
Yeah. I mean, when somebody, and that's one of the things that, we always talk about the fast, the be fast, the signs.
Right.
But at the end of it, we always say, but when you call 911, let them know it could be a stroke, because time is of the essence with the stroke. Yeah, no,
right.
With everything else, but with time is of the essence to get the blood clotting disease, So and she did that, and they still weren't listening.
Right. So then I later found out from a friend who works for 911 that they misrouted the call. Like they didn't take it as seriously as they should have, because I was sitting there, waiting for them to show up, and a fire truck and ambulance finally showed up. It felt like forever. I know my boss was getting mad. She's like, did they have to come from Redmond? Because it was just taking a long time. And so they get there and they assess me, and I'm sitting in the driver's seat still, and they hook me up to all the electrodes to check my heart and everything. And they're like, oh, well, your vitals are fine. And so
my vitals were perfect before and perfect after my stroke.
Mine were perfect during.
Yeah.
And
so
they're like, you're fine.
And the medical field should know that. They should know certain situations, Yeah.
So I'm sitting there and they're asking me questions, and they ask me for my ID, and they can clearly see that my entire right side is numb. So I'm trying to reach over with my left hand and grab it off this, out of my wallet. And I can't, because you have to hold it with one hand and pull with the other, and I can't. So my friend had to help me. And then, in the meantime, they're calling my mom and boyfriend and letting them know if there's an emergency. And so basically they asked me if I'm able to stand up. And they asked me if I'm able to turn first. And I'm like, no. And, this is all slurred speech. I'm not making much sense, but I think I'm making sense. Even I'm trying to be very slow because I know I'm slurring and I can hear myself. So they're frustrating me and they're not really listening. And I'm like, I think I'm having a stroke. And they're like, okay, well, have you ever had a panic attack? I'm like, yeah, in college. And it was nothing like this. They're like, okay, well, what happens in a panic attack? I was like, not this. And then I kept hitting my leg with my hand because I was like, ugh, just listen to me.
And you're getting more frustrated because you can't communicate to them exactly what's happening. And they really should have been more professional. That's coming to me. Like they should have just done their job. And the truth is they should have got you on the ambulance and just took you to the hospital where it could have been treated. It's funny that they thought that it was a panic attack because our last show that we just did, John, they thought he was on drugs.
I think that was also a thought because, they were like, I think they had asked at one point, they asked my friend, do you think she'd be on any kind of drugs or anything?
Because you're young. Because you're young.
It's just not possible.
Yeah. We always talk about strokes, look at us. We're not young people, we're not elderly. Most people associate strokes with our grandparents, not with our age or younger. You know what I'm saying? And mine was age 26 when I had my stroke.
Oh my goodness.
So the truth is that's why we want to do these kind of shows. And, I think what I'm getting from this particular show is maybe we should talk to doctors, you know what I'm saying? And do a conference call in front of doctors. Like we have 8 years of shows on my website. Each story is so different. So I think you would want people, doctors and EMS and neurologists, et cetera, to not only read their textbooks, but to learn from stroke patients and survivors and experiences of things that happen so that they could mark it in their brain, right? I mean, it's incredible, so sorry.
Why Lonnie Hunter started Stroke Awareness Oregon, to start getting people not just, to share our stories, but doctors in Bend, the ambulance people, all about TPA, all of that. And and Alicia, I think your story was one that really kicked it over. It's like, we got to get some freaking information out there to our medical field.
That was my goal the first time coming in and meeting with, oh my gosh, the lady that used to work with the blonde hair and the glasses. Was it Beth? No. What was her name?
Where? At St. Charles?
At Stroke Awareness, Oregon. She was,
Carol?
She had a downstairs office, and she was the gal that basically put out all the knowledge stuff. I can't remember, but I met with her.
About Ellen?
No. My goal was basically when I started, like a few months after my strokes, I was like, I need to go and something needs to change, because the fact that I was young and they just basically ignored me, like,
yes.
I mean, I guess I should continue the story so you know what I mean, because it's pretty.
Yes, go ahead.
Every time I go over it, it makes me cry, because it makes me feel like I'm less than human. So at that point, after, the panic attack thing, and I'm explaining to them, like, no, it's not a panic attack. Then they're like, well, can you turn? And I'm like, no. And, my entire right side is completely numb. So they asked me again, and I eventually just grabbed the pillar of my car and turned my body around using the strength from my left side, because I am strong. Thank goodness for that. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't just done what they asked me to do. And then they're like, well, can you stand up? And then, we go back and forth. I'm like, no, I can't. So then I do, but I'm holding onto the pillar of my car, and I'm like leaning and just pulling myself up with one arm. And they're like, oh, well, that makes sense. You're dehydrated.
Oh,
I was like,
wow.
oh. So then I sit back down, and I'm just, I'm kind of at a loss for words. I'm like thinking like, wow. And I remember talking to my dad and saying, please don't let me die. Like, don't let me die, because they're not listening to me. So then they decide that, they're like, well, we don't think we should take you to the hospital. We think you just need to go home and rest, because this is a stressful situation, and it's probably just the effects of stress.
Wow.
And so I know that my direct supervisor was going to take me home, but I was actually going to have her take me to the hospital. So she pulled her car up, and then I know that I think the fire truck had left at that point, but the ambulance was still there. And basically, my boyfriend showed up, and he came and talked to me, and he was like, what do you need? And I was like, I want to go to the hospital. And he knew something was wrong. And I'm sitting there just worried about my car and how it's sticking halfway out into the road and how all my stuff is in it. And I had my breakfast protein shake and, the things that I shouldn't be worrying about. But I was just worried about me being an inconvenience, because clearly I was.
Well, that was the stuff you can control, right?
Right.
You can control, your mind was going to things that you can control. You can control your car, you can control your breakfast, you can control that stuff, but you can't control what's happening at this particular moment. And nobody was helping you.
Right.
They weren't helping you.
So everybody at my work was pretty upset, because they knew something was wrong, and they were all like, all of the employees were watching out a giant window, and they couldn't do anything, because the people that are supposed to be the professionals that are supposed to get you to the hospital to figure out what's wrong didn't do that. So then my boyfriend was like, we're going to go to the hospital. So he pulls his truck up, and I had a paramedic under each arm, and they dragged me to his truck.
And they didn't
hoisted
take you in the ambulance. Your boyfriend took you.
Wow.
And they hoisted me up into the truck and, dragged my leg through mud that was on the truck from hunting. I didn't even realize until I was discharged from the hospital. There was mud down my leg and down the top of my shoe because my foot was folded over. But yeah, so he took me to the hospital, and in the short drive to the hospital, that's when I was completely lucid again. I came out of it, and I was feeling very drained, but I was able to speak again and able to move. And then all of a sudden, the second one happened. Because he was like, "Are you sure you still want to go to the hospital? You sound normal now." And I was like, "Yeah, take me to the hospital." And then the second one started.
Wow.
And
Stroke?
Yeah.
Second stroke?
yeah, in his truck on the way. And so when we got to the hospital, I was just limp in the seat, and there was a little tiny old man in the door of the emergency room, and he went like this, like, bring a wheelchair. And so he brought one to the front door, and Drew had to lift me out of the truck and put me in the wheelchair because I couldn't do it myself. And by the time he parked the truck and got back in, they were about to wheel me back to the emergency room, but it felt like forever again. They took me, the volunteer rolled me up to the registration window, and they wanted my ID, and they wanted to know my birth date, and I'm just limp. And I at the time I just felt like, wow, it feels like I have a broken toe or something. Like, it's not that serious. We can just let her sit here. And, even though I was clearly slurring, like, every sign was there, I felt like the hospital personnel should have been, running for help at that point.
Yeah.
Like, there's somebody limp in a wheelchair and she can't really communicate. And they were asking for my birthday. And I just remember repeating myself because they weren't hearing me because I was slurring so bad.
Wow. Wow.
And at that point, they still, even at the very beginning stages in the hospital, like laying in a hospital bed, and the nurse like thought it was a panic attack.
Oh.
And I know, and I still, I was laying there, and then I went lucid again. Like, I came out of it, which I later found out was like waxing and waning of a stroke, or low blood flow. And so then Dr. Goins, wonderful Dr. Goins, who is one of the founders of Stroke Awareness Oregon, or one of the, is he the head?
He's a head of board of directors.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And I think he was one of the founding members with you guys,
Yes,
right?
with Monet.
Okay, with Monet.
Wow.
Yes.
So he walks in, and he goes, "We're gonna get this figured out, because they had, at that point, I went out again in front of them, and they had to figure out what was going on." And
Wow.
so he's like, "We're gonna take you for a CT scan and figure out if we can see anything." And then he comes back in after the CT scan and goes, "I have some good news and bad news." And I don't remember what the good news was anymore, because I was sitting there with my mom, who had arrived at that time, and my boyfriend, and they were just watching me go in and out of, being completely limp to being lucid to being fine. And then they had to watch me go through all the neurological tests. They finally figured out that something was going on. So, then I had the CT scan, and he comes in and says that, and then goes, "Well, I'm trying to, you had something called vertebral artery dissection." He's like, "And both of your vertebral arteries have basically torn apart on the inner layers, and they're leaking blood in between the layers, which is causing blood clots. And those are, basically that's all he said at that point." And he's like, "And we think you're having something called the TIA."
TIA, that's got to be a major stroke what you're having, not a TIA, right? Am I correct in my thought process?
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with a TIA, like I later found out, obviously it's not a stroke; it's a precursor to, or
Right, right.
you can have them after as well, but it's typically like leading up to a stroke. It's a warning sign,
Right.
and it doesn't cause brain damage, but it causes similar, basically pre-effects. Like you feel, you can have some of the same things happen because it's
Right.
warning you.
Right.
But
right.
no, it was not a TIA. And so they had
I
like,
don't mean to cut you off.
Oh, you're fine.
We have to go because Jim is got a meeting at 12.
okay.
But I would like to invite everybody back to continue this conversation. We'll continue at the end of this show so that everybody knows we're all going to come back. And if Sunday morning is not good for you, we can always do an evening event. At 8 o'clock our time, 9 o'clock, 5 o'clock your time. Yours is 3 hours. What time is it where you guys are? What time
Pacific Standard.
is that?
So
What
it's
time is it now?
8:40 something, 8:40.
Okay, so it's 11:48 here.
Yeah,
So
it's
we're
8:48.
3. But I would love to continue this conversation because it really is, each one of you have such a different, unique, important story to get out. And I really like to have a conversation with the 4 of you, or, with 5 of you with Judy, because, we all have an added thought process on what the other story is about. And I think that's really important. Or maybe you can tie in to the story, a little bit. So it is important for us to continue this conversation together.
Is there a night that everybody prefers?
You can do that. You could, if you don't mind doing it, because everybody probably has to look at their calendars. But it probably would be 8. We could do it 8:30. I don't know if Judy's okay with that. 8:30 or 5 o'clock Oregon time, 8 o'clock our time, or 4 o'clock, whatever you work out with Judy. Okay. So we're not getting you up so early, but we want to let everybody know how important this show is. It really is important because each story has really had a significant, important piece to it. Like, this is a type of show that people can look at over and over and really gravitate towards different important pieces. And I think it's important for people to watch shows like this, because I've learned, like on our last show, Judy went on a cruise and was sat next to a gentleman named John and Dr. April, and John had a stroke. So that moment in time Judy was brought to meet somebody that had a stroke, and they were on our show. So if you're made aware of the show, or if you get a little glimpse of it, that probably means you should be learning something and watching this show, because there's an important message in it for you. So let's all take the time to learn before we get too busy in life, with life, and take Kim's recommendation, or her lifestyle is really to begin in meditation. But even if it's not in meditation, to begin to give yourselves a few minutes a day to be in the silence, to let go of the busyness that is in our lives. I really work on that myself, to give myself the time. When I don't have the time in my household, I go in the car and I drive somewhere and I pull over for a few minutes, just to give myself the thought patterns to center myself, to become aware of what's going on in my life. It really is an important tool. Kim, you wanted to say something?
No, I'm just agreeing with you. And it's that connection to something deeper. There's so much nonsense. There's always something that's going to have us be pulled down.
Yeah.
And, for us to know that there is also, in that same moment, something to pull us up.
Yeah.
And when we get still and we find that connection, it reminds us of that.
Yeah.
And it's important.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to let you, Ashley, Alicia, you're going to be the first to begin this conversation. You just at the moment that you were in the hospital, and we're going to begin from there. Then we'll bring Beverly and Steve and Kim into the conversation. But I want to thank you all for your time. And Judy, what a great show. What a great show. And we're going to continue it in a few weeks. Look on our website for the show. And thank you, Jim, for hanging out a little bit longer with us. On 3, we're going to blow kisses, and please have a wonderful day. Enjoy your life. Enjoy each moment. Enjoy your family. Take a little bit of time for yourselves. That's what I've learned in my life, that we got to keep a little bit for ourselves. Don't give everything to everybody, and really to find a little piece of silence in your world. Go into the silence. It may not be meditation, but go into that silence, find the silence, and connect to anything that gives you power. So on 3, we're gonna blow kisses. 1, 2, 3. Bye, everybody. We'll see you.
Bye. God bless you all.
Are we on?
tea.